Welcome to our Community Connect call. It's nice to see some faces on here, and I know that there's a lot of us that are neurospicy. I like to call it neurospicy because it's more fun to say than neurodivergent. But neurodivergent, as an umbrella, classifies three different types of brain neurotypes. So this is just means that our brains are wired slightly differently than the neurotypical population. There is nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make us broken. It just makes us slightly different. And oftentimes we can use our neurotype to our advantage. So the three different classifications of neurodivergence are ADHD, autism, and giftedness. And it's not you are one or the other. They can overlap. You can have autism and ADHD. You can be gifted and have ADHD. You can have all three. So I first want to get into just sharing an image so that we have a little bit of a better understanding of how they all interact and the common traits. So our yellow circle here is the autism circle, our blue circle is the ADHD circle, and our red circle is the giftedness. So you'll see that different aspects have different similar traits to them. With ADHD, this is more of the concentration aspect of it. So there is, let me just zoom in, difficulty with transitions due to challenges with switching focus, working memories impacted, craving novelty. So you want the new shiny thing always. Social interactions are affected by impulse control and focus differences, differences in regulating attention, hyperfocus when interested, difficulty focusing when you are not interested, needing movement or fidgeting or stimming to aid in focus. I would put this more in a crossover category, but it is here. The ability to respond quickly in crises or emergencies. So if you are someone who shit hits the fan and you're like, I'm in, let me help, that is actually one of the superpowers here. We can also be easily bored. You have a wide range of interest. There is thinking in metaphors and symbols, learning in a non-linear manner, and then coming up here, crossing over with others. Alexithymia. Oh, I didn't know that that was a name for it, but difficulty identifying and naming your emotions. This is something I have struggled with my entire life. I didn't understand the concept of feel your feelings. I was like, what does that mean? How are you feeling? Fine. I cannot name emotions. It's still something that I am working on. Interoception differences. So this typically means that we have a very, very highly sensitive, in tune sense of our bodies, and we can feel things that other people may not be able to feel, which is why certain clothes might feel itchy or too tight or overstimulating, or you hate socks, but you also hate the feeling of dirt on the floor from your dogs. So it's, do I wear socks because they're uncomfortable, or do I step on the dirt from my dirty dogs? And that's one of my constant battles currently. Stimming, so moving, fidgeting. I have so many different fidgets around me, but we listen and we focus better when we are fidgeting and moving with our hands and keeping ourselves stimulated. Differences in impulse control, perception of time, so time can move faster or slower. Atypical social interactions, oh boy, yes. Hyperactivity, unique ways of learning, intense curiosity, and the big one right in the middle for all neurodivergent people is executive function difficulties. We struggle with doing the things that we know that we need to do. We have creative thinking, emotional sensitivity, being interest driven. In the autism circle specifically, pattern recognition, sometimes motor skills are impacted. I am so klutzy. I bump into things all the time. Needing routine, order, and or clear expectations, especially when under stress. Now, one of the reasons I didn't think I could be autistic was because I didn't need routine. I don't wake up at the same time and brush my teeth in the same way and then grab the same thing and put on the same clothes. But it's more predictability. So autistic people love being able to know what they are getting themselves into because that requires a lot less sensory input for us to be able to put the pieces together of the situation. Preference for interpersonal connection through interests. I love talking about things. I love info dumping, but talking about feelings, we are not, that probably won't get along. Tendency to hyper focus on a few interests for an extended period of time. So that is how autism differentiates from ADHD. ADHD, you hyper focus on something, you're like, that is awesome, but now I'm over it. Let's move on to the next thing. But you can have autism and ADHD and have that crossover and internal battle of, I love the new shiny thing, but I also love my special interests that I have for a long period of time. Differences in verbal and nonverbal communication, hyper awareness of sensory information. And then we have giftedness. So, fun fact, I thought I was gifted up until about 6 months ago. It's not giftedness. I was intellectually tested. It is just straight up autism, and I'm good at pattern recognition and I'm good at writing. But it's not gifted, even though that's what they told me all throughout my childhood years. Giftedness is a tendency towards abstract thinking. You have rapid comprehension of things, early emotional awareness, fascination with theory, awareness of needing complexity, so keeping things challenging, early concern for existential issues. So if you ever have existential crises, that could be one. Tendency to make connections across domains. So as you can see here, it is a giant circle. And there are different ways for brains, just making sure everyone's here, different ways that our brains function. So I want to share a little bit about my story. So again, I didn't find out that I was autistic until about 6 months ago. And I spent the first 3 decades of my life feeling very out of place, very different. I didn't really get along with people in school. I was friends with the teachers. I was the teacher's pet. I was best friends with my coaches. I went for the camp counselors. I connected a lot better with adults. And I was always the one in school with the straight A's and president of everything. I like that predictability. I like the sense of having control, and I socialize by having shared interests or activities, being like, okay, we're going to hang out to accomplish this goal, not just hang out to hang out. I always struggled with that aspect. I don't like talking to strangers. I don't like small talk. So when I played a game of Survivor in July of last year. I had a terrible time. I love Survivor. It is my all-time favorite TV show. And when this opportunity presented itself, where it was like, I can play a 4-day condensed game of Survivor, I'm in, I'm going to win this thing. And the challenges were fun, but the social aspect of it, of not knowing if people were lying to my face and having to lie to people, just it made me feel nauseous. Like I've been on national television, I've been on runways in bikinis, I have been interviewed, like you name it. I can get in front of a group of hundreds of people and talk with no nerves. That made me the most nervous my entire life. I was nauseous the entire time, just due to the social aspect of it. And that was the spark for me to be like, something's not right. Some people find roller coasters fun. Some people don't find roller coasters fun. I went into that being like, that was going to be the most fun experience of my life. And it was the complete opposite. So I wanted to explore that. Started working with a psychologist, and 8 months later, officially got the autism diagnosis. And I truly understand now why autism symbol could be a puzzle piece because it was the one thing in my picture where I was like, you're autistic. And I was like, oh, everything makes sense now. But what autism can present as a woman, is entirely different than the stereotypical autism that we were taught to look out for in school. And I'm so glad that people are starting to talk about it more and there is more awareness about it because there are so many women like myself that are undiagnosed at the age of 18 that just walk around being incredibly hard on themselves and just don't know that aspect. It's very, very similar with something like ADHD. ADHD presents so differently in women than it does in men. And looking on here, I do see a couple of neurodivergent people that are here. Does anyone want to share their own experience or stories of how they came about finding out that they were neurodivergent? Feel free to take yourself off mute. Feel free to share. Go for it, Michelle.
Hey guys, I'll just hop on and make myself visible. Um, so I recently got diagnosed with ADHD, I would say about a year ago, officially. Um, Kind of looking back through childhood, I definitely had signs and symptoms, but I just was able to mask very well and cope very well. It wasn't until more recently in the last couple years after I had a bad concussion, after I had my beautiful daughter, especially that my symptoms were just getting so out of hand because I couldn't cope how I used to cope anymore, that I just could not function in the day. I could not get anything done. I was just stuck all the time. And it was actually you, Lexi, who you literally looked me in my face and said, I think it's time that you look into a diagnosis. And that's when you told me about Talk with Frida. And that's when I hooked up with them. And they were like, yep, you literally have 9 out of the 10 check marks. And absolutely, that is 100% yes. So we're going to look into, I decided to take the medication route just because, like I said, I realized all of the coping strategies that I did that I didn't know were coping strategies. I could no longer do because I have a child that runs my life now and I couldn't run my life anymore. So once I got diagnosed, I started on medication. It has helped me, I would say like 80%, hasn't helped like 100%. Nothing's ever 100%, but it's definitely helped a lot with just my functioning day to day, my focus. I can feel like my brain can handle things a little bit better than it used to, but that was recent too within the last year and I'm 31 years old.
Yeah, the late diagnosis where you're like, oh, everything makes sense. And it really was for me when my clients that I started working with that I struggled personally, like we shared similar things, being like, oh, yeah, like you struggle with food a lot and food reflexes. So do I. You're struggling with disorganization, or you've just completely burnt out from pushing yourself so much that you go into that collapse state. And I started to recognize as the clients that I related to got diagnosed with ADHD, I was like, maybe I have ADHD. And that was something that I contemplated between early 2023 and like mid 2024 being like, okay, these are all symptoms, but with neurodivergence, as you saw in the graphs, there's a lot of disconnect or overlap in terms of executive dysfunction and the different sort of things that we struggle with. So there is overlap there. Michelle, what would you say is the biggest thing that's changed since your diagnosis?
I'm going to say clarity, if that makes sense, and just a new kind of level of understanding and being able to be kinder to myself because, growing up, there was a lot of, like, you should be able to do this. Why can't you just do this? Like, you're better than this. Like, you know better than this. You can do this. Everyone else can do this. Why can't you do the same? And it was kind of like a weight off because I'm like, you know what? My brain doesn't work like normal brains do. So maybe I need to do things differently, but just because I do things a little differently doesn't make it wrong. So it was kind of starting to unlearn the things that I was taught in school or just growing up. Again, just people don't know, like parents, family, teachers, like they don't know either. So just kind of unlearning this rhetoric that I'd been taught that just did not work for me. So kind of like just accepting myself for who I was let me be kinder to myself. And it's yes, yes, that's a monster. Hercules is fighting the monster. Sorry. Yeah, so just being kinder to myself and just kind of giving myself the space to be able to do what I need to do that doesn't look like someone else's path, and that's okay. That's the biggest difference.
I'll share Lexi because mine's a little bit interesting. That for most of my life, my challenges were always put back to the fact that I am a sexual abuse survivor. So they always said it's your complex PTSD. And it was very nice. I can't even say the word, like nice, great, validating to know that I really don't have complex PTSD. I don't have flashbacks. I am not paralyzed by the talk of going to parole board hearings to keep, my father in prison. Like those things don't paralyze me. So I could never understand why I would have all this emotional dysregulation, hyperactivity, and restlessness to the point then going the opposite where I'm paralyzed. Impulse control. Ask anybody at HQ when we're having a meeting. If Amber asks a question, I know the answer. Like I have to like hold myself back from just blurting out answers or sharing stories. I get easily stressed and overwhelmed, which they would always say that I had emotional dysregulation. I was told I'm disorganized, but only in my personal life. Like it's weird. If I'm taking care of when I was taking care of my children, I was so organized to the minute. For work, I'm so organized to the minute. I'm a super clean until I get dysregulated and then I'm messy. Like I am messy when I come to Jamie's house because I can't find a spot. I don't have my stuff. So when it was told to me that actually the way they said it was you either were born like this or your ADHD is a result of the trauma. And I don't know if you've ever heard that. And I was like, really? And it's because I was so young that my brain was rewired in a very different way. I learned at the age of 5 how to be hyper vigilant and watching everything and like to make sure that I would keep myself safe. So it's because honestly, like I can talk about that trauma stuff all the time. It really honestly does not upset me anymore. But this puts a name to it, and I keep getting told like, "Oh, you should take medication. You should take medication." And I'm like, I don't want to go that route because I went that route with Effexor, and coming off of Effexor was a bitch. Like that's for like anxiety, depression, and that's what they put me on because they thought, like a lot of my issues were because of the complex PTSD. But it makes sense. Like I do have really bad OCD, and it's not OCD that they show on TV. I was explaining it to Samantha the other day because I was like, oh, like if I get on a tangent, the intrusive thoughts, they don't stop. Like
And
I
the
have,
rumination where it's
oh my
days
God,
and days and days and days.
it'll be 3 o'clock in the morning and I'll go, but you know what you're going to do. Or I start counting, honestly, I start counting how many clients I have and how many I need to the end of the month and then how many renewals. And I do that number over and over and over. And I go, yeah, I got it figured out. Go to sleep now. And then I'll wake up a half an hour later and I'll start again. I mean, like I drive everybody in my personal life that's close to me up the wall because I am a handful, but I'm so lovable. But it makes sense. My daughter, who's also has a diagnosis, is also really bad OCD. Like, and hers are things like we went through a period where it was like she couldn't chew food because she knew she was going to choke to death. So Carly only had liquids for, and this was in university. She wasn't a child. We went through the beige food thing when she was a kid, and then we went through the red food thing. But then in university, she could only have liquids because she was going to choke to death. And then we went through a phase for 6 years with tarantulas, convinced, like so I go like, yeah, you come by it honestly. Like, so, but you know what? There's a lot of like I was looking at that list and I could pick out all the really good things that I have going for me that you just sort of take for granted, right? Like, oh, like I do that, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. I do speak in metaphors all the time. It's one of the things that my clients will say they love about me because I'm able to give them a metaphor on how I'm speaking or how to think of something.
Whereas for me, I don't understand metaphors whatsoever. I take things so literally that I'm like, what? Like, I understand what people replace the phrase with, but I don't actually understand what that phrase means. And there's so many times where like I'll ask people, be like, can you explain what that actually means? And they'll break it down and be like, oh, I guess so. Um, yeah. So just different ways that brains are wired. But
No, but
Michelle,
it doesn't mean like the way you are that you have to remain that way. Like I've had many conversations with Amber because I'll tell him I get really distracted when I'm at work. Like I will be training somebody and there'll be a noise and nobody else looks, but I'll look. And I'm looking and you know, and he goes, "Okay, well, how are you going to work on that?" So, we've come up with some things on how I can work on that because I don't want to look like a coach that's distracted or doing something off. But I think that the main thing is that if you can identify things that are potential roadblocks to you doing better in life, you don't just say, "Well, I have ADHD." Like you don't do that. You work on it until you figure out, and that's where cognitive behavior therapy comes in and learning tricks and is it exhausting? Sometimes, yeah, but life can be exhausting. So I'm really anti, oh, I deserve to have specialness or special concessions because of this. I do think that if I'm going to work in an environment where everybody else is held to a certain level, I have to be held to that same level. I just maybe have to figure out different ways to channel my energy.
yeah. And this goes back to what Michelle was saying, how since her diagnosis, like me as well, I'm a lot more kind to myself having this new level of awareness of like, oh, my brain is literally wired differently than the majority of the population. Therefore, the systems and the structure and the way that things are organized for other people might not work for me, but what does work for me? What has worked for me in the past? And a lot of times, like, I need to get adequate sleep and I need a slow start to my day in order to feel my best and be able to show up. And if I don't get that, I know that I need to take a period of time later in the day where I need to slow down and process stuff. Otherwise, it's going to lead to a crying meltdown. The number of meltdowns, there's meltdowns and shutdowns. So, meltdowns are the hardcore bawling your eyes out, cannot control. I have one of those probably once a week, just due to something in my life coming up and being completely unpredictable. My mom was so good at regulating me and detecting this. And when I told her that I was autistic and brought this up with her, she was like, yeah, you always had really big feelings. And we knew that like you felt them to your core and like just a really tight hug. That's super regulating for me. Meltdowns, again, have one about once a week just because something pops up. Especially now, there's a lot going on in my personal life that's creating unpredictability. And that's where I struggle most. And then there's shutdowns. And shutdowns are when everything becomes too much and you push through for so long until you literally can't anymore. And that's when you go into like a freeze state where I go nonverbal. I can't talk. Can't have communication with people. Like if people ask me how I'm doing, I'll just look at them and I'll like half smile, but I go nonverbal. I will isolate and just like close the door, lay in my bed. Petting my dog's one of the best things in terms of regulation, but I have had to learn, okay, this thing is potentially going to set me off to have either a meltdown, or if I continue this way, I'm going to have a shutdown. What can I do proactively to offset that? Or if I feel one coming on, communicate, I'm going into a meltdown period or I'm having a shutdown, or just like having my partner be able to recognize that now and know in these times, this is what I need. If I step away, don't follow me, don't come after me. That is too much. That is too overstimulating. But it's approaching it with curiosity and compassion, recognizing that no matter how much I try to fight these things that come up, I can't fight them away. That just makes it worse. That will amplify it and that will take me way longer to recover from than if I just completely surrender to this is what my nervous system is going through right now and I have to process it and I have to hyperventilate, cry, and then I need a nap and then I need some food or I need to go outside. So it's being really, really kind and aware and having that level of awareness since diagnoses, my mental health has gotten way better. The number of shutdowns I have is way less, but like I still have meltdowns. So, for example, the Hammer Fitness Gala that we had in January, I was supposed to go to a hair and makeup artist to get my makeup done, and I show up at her door. No answer. Send her a message, no answer. So 5 minutes later, she calls me. I'm so sorry. My son broke his wrist. We're at the hospital right now. Didn't have time to reach out to you. I'm going to find you a new makeup artist and connect you. And like she took care of everything and it was solved within like 20 minutes. But on the drive from the one makeup artist house to the other one, I was sobbing uncontrollably because of that unpredictability of, okay, I'm going to show up here. I'm going to be here from this time to this time. And then my drive, like I look ahead and I plan everything. And that one little thing set me off. But I had enough time to process. I didn't listen to any music on the drive from Barrie to Toronto. I had like an hour and a half of breathing and regulation so I could step into this very large social gathering that was incredibly overstimulating and still be on because I had that level of awareness that I previously wouldn't have. Yeah. Does anyone else want to share their own experiences? No, that's okay. There are a couple of things that I wanted to bring up, and I know we only have like 10-ish minutes, so we can always do a part two, part three, part four of this conversation, especially if you're watching replays. There are a couple common mental aspects to neurodivergence, whether it's ADHD, autism, giftedness. The first one is something called pathological demand avoidance. So this is where when expectations are given to our brain, whether they are from someone else, a coach saying, here's your macros, or here's the cardio that you have to do, or here's your meal plan, or self expectations of, I really need to put my laundry away today. If that happens, there are some of us where our brain is wired, myself included, where the demand avoidance pops up where it's like, fuck you, we want to do absolutely anything but that. Even if genuinely I wanted to do something, but it was presented in a way where it comes across as a demand, my system rejects it. And there's like a, oh, nope, don't want to do that. So instead, one of the things that helps with my system is reframing the expectation or the demand as a question, presenting it with questions instead so we can be curious and it feels like we have options and it feels like we're making a choice. So instead of being like, I have to have my chicken for dinner and I have to have my turkey for lunch and like, here's my meal plan. It's like, okay, I have my meals planned for the day. Which one do I want to eat first? I'm still following the exact same thing, but instead of that, this is your breakfast, this is your lunch, this is your dinner. By the time dinner rolls around, I'm like, I don't want that because I expended so much mental energy forcing myself to eat the things that I had pre-planned in this specific order. When I have the flexibility to be like, ooh, I'm going to have my stuff that I planned for dinner, but I'm going to have it for my meal one instead. Or what do I feel like doing today when I go into the gym? Do I want to do my lower one or do I want to do my lower two? Having those options really alleviates some of the mental stress. So if you are someone who is a neurodivergent client and you are feeling that like ick and resistance with your system when coaches say, here's your macros, here's your cardio, here's your training, mentally, I've done it before because I've worked with coaches, you can push through to a specific point, but there gets to a point where you hit a wall and that shutdown happens. And now all of a sudden you cannot follow the process. You want to be proactive ahead of that, noticing, oh, there's a lot of resistance in my system right now because of these expectations that are being placed upon me. We as coaches can modify things. We can ask you questions. What does feel doable? What is something that is your biggest challenge right now so that we can modify and give you a sense of agency in this process, especially if that resistance is there. Okay, so just something to be aware of. The second mindset thing is something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So, this is where if we are given any sort of constructive criticism or feedback, or we do something wrong, it feels like we've been stabbed in the chest and it takes us multiple days to recover from it. Even if it's like, I got pulled over 3 weeks ago, didn't get a ticket, just got a warning, But I thought about that for a week and I was stressed and I ruminated on it and I thought about all of the potentials and I scripted conversations that didn't happen with the police officer thinking about it. But that rumination and the pain of it, it literally felt like I had been stabbed in the chest and I was sick to my stomach because I did something wrong. And there was a confrontation with authority. And some people can get over it and be like, yeah, okay, cool, I got pulled up. No, it dysregulated me for multiple days. And there's nothing that we can do to make that go away quicker. And if we try to force the constructive feedback to feel fine, that just makes it worse. So it's surrendering to it and really being like, where do I feel this in my body? Okay, we know that this is temporary and recognize it, name it. This is my RSD. This is my rejection sensitivity dysphoria coming up. It is a trait. This too shall pass. But it's that compassion with yourself instead of being critical, being like, I should just be over this by now. Not
But
doing
you know what, too, Lexi? It's also important for coaches to recognize that that person might not be coming across, might not be intentionally defensive, because I've often been accused of that. Why are you so defensive? And it's the same thing. I can't stand it if I screw up. Cannot handle it. I have a really hard time with it. I want people to ask me, "Are you okay?" And then I want to talk about it. Like I screwed up. I feel terrible about this. I can't believe I did that, which is the wrong thing to do. I've learned that, the hard way. But I think it's really important that people understand that if because I do work with people that my clients will tell me, and sometimes they don't tell me right away, and then I get the defensiveness right back, and I didn't give rejection, and I didn't, discipline anybody. But it's important that if somebody is coming across as defensive and they do have that, it's a protective mechanism. They
yeah.
don't mean to be defensive. They're not defending their actions. They're trying to get you to understand, hey,
We're
I'm not a piece of shit.
Yeah. Providing context. And this is something that neurodivergence, we prioritize information and context over emotion. Neurotypical people, emotion drives conversation, emotion drives how they feel when they walk away from a conversation. Whereas neurodivergent people, we just want to give you as much information as possible so that you can understand precisely where we're coming from. It's not excuses. It's not being defensive, although we get accused for that all the time. But it's like, no, this is the way that my brain works. I'm providing you with context, and I would appreciate if you provided me with context about what's going on or why you chose to make this decision or the thought process. And when there's that mismatch of prioritization of emotions versus the context and the information, there will be communication struggles. And that's typically why we see neurodivergent people being friends with other neurodivergent people because we get along really well, where it's like, oh, let me info dump. Okay, now it's your turn to info dump. Now I'm going to share a related story to tell you that I understand where you're coming from because this one time I did a similar thing. And oftentimes we can interrupt conversations just to throw in, hey, I can relate to that as well. Um, yeah, we got like 3-ish minutes coming up. There's definitely going to be a part two, guys. So just heads up. I don't know when, but we will have a part two of this conversation. Other things that I just want to bring up for you guys to do your own research on for now. And if you do have questions about this, please let me know. And I would love to info dump on you. The first one is neurodivergent people are more prone to something called mast cell activation syndrome or histamine intolerance. So if you are someone who is itchy or exercise intolerant, where getting hot and sweaty, you break out in rashes, or if you are puffy and super fatigued, that could be connected. And the other thing that is connected is something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome has like 8 different types. The most common one is hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So not everyone has hands where thumbs can touch your fingers. If you can do this, you are probably hypermobile. I did not know that. There is a difference between hypermobility and flexibility. It's not I can do the splits. It's your joints have additional range, and you are more prone to injuries such as knee injuries, hip injuries, ankle injuries, back injuries, herniated discs, because part of Ehlers-Danlos is a collagen, which is connective tissue disorder. Our collagen is more loosey-goosey than the neurotypical people. So, two things to look into: mast cell activation syndrome, EDS, and if you have any questions, do let me know. Yeah. Anyone else have any final things that they want to share? Again, there will be a part 2. I just want to say thank you for everyone who has joined us for this evening. It's wonderful to see lots of faces. Yeah. Okay. Well, I will keep you posted. And if you have made it to the end of this replay, thank you for watching as well. If you have any questions whatsoever, again, I love info dumping on this stuff. I love bonding over shared experiences. If you want to reach out and have a one-on-one call, I am more than happy to do so. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you. Bye.